EdTransformed is brought to you by School of the Future International Academy, in short, SOFIA. SOFIA is a non-profit, non-governmental organization which supports educational institutions, school leaders and educators in their effort to improve their knowledge and skills. This way, we contribute to the creation of equal opportunities for every student in the world. This is a series of podcasts where we try to open up discussions on various topics that interest the modern educational community. We share personal stories of educators and students, as we believe that what happens in one classroom or school can happen to more. Sharing approaches and ideas can only help us offer our students more. Today, we are honored to have Diana Diaz Harrison with us. Diana is the founder and CEO at Arizona Autism Charter Schools. Recently, the school won the very prestigious Yass Award for 2022. The $1 million Yass Prize celebrates the country's education provider which best demonstrates the STOP principles. STOP is an acronym which stands for Sustainable, Transformational, Outstanding, and Permissionless Education. Diana has an interesting story to share with us regarding the drive behind the decision of establishing the school and the school's vision and mission. Hi, Diana.
Hello, Natassa. So happy to be with you today.
Thank you very much for joining us. To begin with, can you share the story behind your decision to establish Arizona Autism Charter School and what is the school all about?
Of course. I was driven to start Arizona Autism Charter Schools because I have a son with autism. And here in the US, it was very difficult to find educational options or a school that really understood my son's challenges. His name is Sammy, and pushed him to be the best that he could be. I really felt that in typical schools, programs for the neurodiverse, and autism is a neurodiversity, were not very prioritized and were, kind of programs off to the side, and school leaders were more worried about the general population. But I learned early on that there are research-based practices that can be implemented with children on the autism spectrum that yield amazing results. But unfortunately, those strategies were not being implemented in school. So it was a very difficult journey, and we placed my son in a private school that was a lot better. But those schools were private pay, and we were paying about $40,000 a year. And that really was not sustainable for me. At the time I was a single mom, and I would have paid anything to have my child in a good school. But it wasn't sustainable in terms of, there was 20 plus years of, using a huge part of my salary to pay for my son's school. Then I did learn that in the US, there is a movement called the Charter School Movement that basically are mission-driven schools that are publicly funded. And I thought, somebody should start a publicly funded charter school focused on children with autism. But in my state, that was not available. So I did my research, and there was a wonderful school, an autism charter school that was tuition free in Florida. So we were inspired to do the same in Arizona.
Lovely. As I said earlier, recently Arizona Autism Charter Schools were recognized by receiving an important national prize, the Yass Prize. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and what it means for the school? And also, I really want to know, how did you feel when you found out that your school is the one to receive the prize in 2022?
It was an ecstatic feeling. We were so surprised to be the $1 million Yass Prize winners. I was blown away. It's going to make such a difference for our school in terms of elevating the project-based learning. We partner with the co-founder of Apple, who has a curriculum called WazEd, developed by Steve Wozniak. And so when I wrote the grant, I thought I really need to get, more project-based learning modules and materials into the hands of my teachers and kids. I wrote in for that. And then I knew that just like myself, there are parents in other states who are desperate for this kind of educational solution that's, high level and tuition free, and that really celebrates neurodiverse children and pushes them to be the most that they can be. And our kind of charter network doesn't exist in very many states. So part of the grant will be used to support other founding teams, other parents and professionals who really want to replicate our model and support children with autism in their own states, which, there's a tremendous need. Some of our research here in the US tells us that 1 in 40 children are on the autism spectrum, and typically they get very left behind in traditional settings. So we are showing what's possible to folks in other states who want to do the same thing. And the Yass Prize is going to fund those efforts to support other people who want to have an exceptional school for kids with autism and other neurodiversities.
Amazing. I'm really, really happy that you received it. I want to congratulate you. I really think that will help you take all the work, all the excellent work that you do with your schools to the next level, expand it, include more families, include more people. And we are very, very happy that you're enabled to do so now. As you mentioned, you're applying a project based, hands on approach of teaching and learning in your school. How does this approach help your students to improve, keeping in mind that they are students with some sort of neurodiversity?
Project-based learning makes all the difference for students on the autism spectrum. One of the difficulties with children on the spectrum is that if they are not motivated to do something, it is very hard to make them do whatever it is, whether it's an academic worksheet or learning a new skill. But if we play on the strengths of neurodiverse children, typically they have very fixed interests that they are extremely knowledgeable and passionate about. Some children, love, trains is like it's one of the things that our kids love the most, or they love skyscrapers, or, they like World War II planes. It's very specific, the things that they can typically fixate on. So if we are teaching skills that lead to a project that is of high interest to them. So for example, if you want to teach geometric concepts and angles for the sake of teaching angles, it's very difficult to engage students who, don't see the value of just learning about angles. But if you are teaching angles for the purpose of building a geometric city or a skyscraper or an elevator. We had a student design and build an elevator and learned all kinds of geometry concepts along the way. Then they're motivated. Then there's a purpose for those foundational skills that are going to help them with their passions and their fixed interests, and they can have some agency in free will when they design the projects and how they spend their time at school. And it gives them more purpose for learning sometimes those tedious foundational skills. But when you say you're going to be able to apply this in your project of your choice, we see the magic happen.
So you give them the opportunity to choose their own projects depending on their interests.
Absolutely. That's what makes it very special. Anytime you can give really any students, agency and how they will apply foundational skills to create something that is of their own mind, their own creativity, their own interests, we really see fantastic results. I mean, we present to them, areas that we want them to learn and focus on. We do have, curriculum that's project based, but the exposure to all of those things helps them decide, I really want to learn about geometry because I need that to build my elevator. And it's very fascinating to see what they choose, and also that sometimes students will have similar interests, and the collaboration in the projects is fantastic because social skills is another deficit area that we like to work on. But if two students are, have similar interests and are working on a project together, the soft social skills also are part of the learning.
Definitely. I was just thinking, what would you say to these teachers who really want to experiment with project based learning, especially if they have in their classrooms students that are in the autism spectrum, but they are afraid that the workload will be so high that they won't be able to make it in their very busy timetables?
Yes, that is a concern for many teachers, that it seems like something extra to do. But really, in our teacher training about project based learning, we really focus on applying what you know to create something new or a project is the highest order of thinking and learning and applying. So it's more interesting and more fun, for the students and the teachers. It did take a little bit of training and inspiration for our teachers to fully buy in to projects. But when they see, now that we've done it for, almost 8 years, when they see the payoff of how the students feel about their own learning and their own self-esteem, walking parents into a classroom and showcasing projects, and seeing the parents' reaction. Many
Mm.
times parents are crying happy tears because all that they have heard previously is how disabled their kids are and how, what difficult learners they are. But in our school, we invite them in, we show them what they create, all of the foundational skills that are captured in their projects. And many, many times parents are blown away because they never thought they would see their child showcase a project in this way. And we have our students present their projects as well. So that's also a very nice communication opportunity. We do this for all levels of children, from what is called high functioning autism, students that are very verbal and able to present their knowledge, to students who are more impacted and are nonverbal. They use their communication devices to, show a slide presentation of their project, or use the device to share what they did and all the steps along the way. So even the most impacted students can have something to show about their own learning, and it's really magical. It's really reframing how we see autism, not so much as a disability, but a different way of thinking, learning, processing, and still, very bright, creative learners.
Perfect. I can only imagine what an emotional moment would be for a parent to see their children achieving this much when they were told for years and years that their child, they would find it very, very hard to learn. I want to focus a little bit more on the parents, especially with your experience as a mom of an autistic child. How would you describe the feelings that parents have before they bring their kids to school, to your school, and how do they change? How do these feelings change as time goes by?
A lot of parents come to our school feeling very defeated because the way special education is structured in the US is, it's very compliance driven. And, the federal government has laws and you have to do X, Y, and Z. For example, a child may be assigned, 15 minutes of speech therapy per week, and schools are trying to basically be in compliance, and sometimes that is doing, the bare minimum. If somebody determines you're going to have 15 minutes of speech, then a speech therapist comes in, pulls your child out, they get that service, and then, the rest of the day, who knows if they're working on communication skills or what it is. And what I found was that that's very outdated. While, children with special needs should have extra services and supports to help them thrive, If somebody is doing it just to be minimally compliant, it's very uninspired. And so parents go to typical public schools, and they are told mostly, we can't do this, we're going to do this, which is very minimal, and your child has all these deficits. And that's just not a doesn't make for a great innovative learning environment for a child, who has a special way of learning. So when we started our school, luckily, I was not too jaded by the very litigious compliance models out there because I was not in special education. I'm a former teacher, but I was not in special education because, people in special educations were scared to start the school. They said,
Mm.
how are you going to manage compliance? I said, we're going to go above and beyond compliance. If a child has speech deficits, communication goals will be worked on every single day, all the time, not just 15 minutes here and there. And so that's exactly how we operate. I mean, in order to do this, you have to prioritize small class sizes and a
Mm.
small student to staff ratio. That's the only way we can really reach kids and support them with their academic and social emotional goals, their behavioral goals. And many times, big bureaucratic districts are spending all the money on lawyers and compliance instead of putting the money with the teachers and staff and the kids. And so by having a charter school, we're able to have local control of how we use those funds to maintain the small student to staff ratios and really go above and beyond minimal compliance.
I think this is something that people face all over the world, literally. Like hear from many schools, from many educators that if they had the flexibility, if they had the choice, if they had the help to create more opportunities for students that are not just autistic student, but any kind of student who learns differently, if they had all these resources to make their lives for the students easier, they would certainly do. And these are the people who know how to do it, who face the day-to-day challenges and opportunities, and they do the day-to-day work. So I'm really happy that at least in the States there is another system. I know that there are a lot of places around the world that this is not the case. But even for those who hear this from all over the world, even if you can't, you're not as lucky as Diana, and you can't go out there and create a charter school to cover the needs for your students, maybe try to communicate the problem more. Try to communicate the fact that the educational community needs more flexibility in terms of structures and how systems work. We need less bureaucracy, more flexibility, if I could put it in a sentence.
100%. I mean, I like to highlight, what is special and positive and different about children with autism, but other people might just see the challenges. If you are not connected to or have a loved one with autism, you might just see them as nonverbal and behavioral and unmotivated. But if you have spent time and love somebody with autism, you know that there's a lot more in there. And if you just find what makes that child tick, then the learning is exponential. But it is a process. And you
Mm.
really have to, love these children to have the patience and the perseverance to find that thing that makes them tick and makes them want to connect with you and learn and then showcase what they can learn. So that's why it's so important, exactly what you said. These schools and the success of my school is because on my board, 50% of the board members that have control of the school are parents of children on the spectrum. I myself, as
Mm.
the founder, I'm an autism mom through and through. And every decision that is not made to follow rules or to, not get
Tick
in
boxes.
litigation. Yeah, it's all because we believe in the kids, we know the kids, and we will do whatever it takes to help them flourish some kids need more supports than others, and we're very in tune with the different levels of needs. But it's also, it's not a job for me. It's not a business. It is a true labor of love. And so that is kind of the opposite of bureaucracy, where, something exists because it needs to by law. No, for us, it's a calling. And so I think around the world, if people are empowered to work with kids that they have a connection with, that they know they love, that have learning differences, great things can happen, because those are the people that truly care about the outcomes. Other people might see our kids as difficult and disabled, and they don't know what to do. In our case, we're so connected to the students, they're our own children, and there's nothing like that connection to produce a school that prioritizes their needs, the way they learn, and really wants to showcase their positive outcomes and really their brilliance. Because once you get them to that point, they can do amazing things.
I'm 100% sure about it. You spoke earlier about the way people who have not been in touch with autistic children think about the challenges that these children are facing, the students are facing. I wanted to speak to you a little bit about the stigma that comes with it. I have noticed that it is existent, it is everywhere. And one of the goals of the school is to battle that stigma that some communities assign to autistic kids. Can you share with us ways in which the school does that? Do you have any success stories of changing the narrative and people's perception about autistic kids?
Absolutely. I think with any learning difference, there could be a stigma. And for children with autism, there are some challenges that can be very alarming and different for people who don't understand. A lot of our kids have very serious sensory issues. And if they are disturbed by being in a loud environment, they might have a very, very difficult, horrible tantrum. And, if you have trained parents and staff, you can help them through that. And then you can help them, start to tolerate different things that are happening in the world, like noise and chatter. And, you can help them learn to self-advocate, to say, oh, before I go into this busy cafeteria, I really need some headphones. So you start to help them replace the tantrum behavior with functional behavior, which is asking for what you need or asking not to go there. And that is, shaping these types of behaviors is what we do all day, every day. But if those challenges, sensory challenges, communication challenges, social challenges are not addressed, then the child does have a hard time navigating the world. I mean, we've run across parents that enroll at the school that are pretty much trapped in their house because they can't take their child out in the community because they're afraid of terrible meltdowns and tantrums. But as they spend time in the school and we work to replace that behavior and shape it into functional communication, whether it's the child showing us on their communication device, I need quiet time, or actually, instead of screaming, I know how to ask for a snack for, very impacted children. Or, if a higher functioning child replaces their, negative language with positive self thoughts, if we help them train to do that, again, then we're reaching kind of the best part of them as human beings. And the neurodiversity can be very special because people with very fixed interests are able to solve amazing problems. They say that historically, people like Einstein were on the autism spectrum because he had such a fixed interest that he worked and worked and worked until he, solved or found the theory of relativity. And only somebody with such fixed interests could spend the time, the depth, and the energy to go that far into solving a problem. So we always like to show examples of people in history that were likely known to be on the spectrum to our students. And then we like to show examples from our own community. We have a student who was very isolated before he came to us. And, now he's 3 to 4 years down the line. And he says that autism is his superpower because he's a visual thinker. And when he sees an array of, numbers and problems, he can see patterns and come up with really interesting solutions. We have kids that have such interesting intelligence. We have a child that if you tell him what year you were born and your date of birth, he immediately can calculate your age and your and he'll never forget it. Like he can ask 100 people, what day you were born and what month and what date, and he'll remember their birthday forever. And so, that's kind of nuanced, interesting things. We have another kiddo who will look at cars in the parking lot and memorize all the license plates. So we're trying to come up with projects that take advantage of that interesting intelligence that they have so that they can apply what they learn in a more functional way. Not just rattling off license plates, but what can you do that is of use to society or the community that plays on your special intelligence. So because we celebrate, every time a child masters a skill, including, instead of having a tantrum, I'm going to ask for a break. That's a celebration. Every little thing, every ounce of progress is a celebration. And then slowly but surely, that changes the narrative in the children's minds, in the parents' minds. Instead of getting calls from school saying, hey, you need to pick up your child because they had an aggressive meltdown, we're calling them to say, your child just did this. We wanted to share with you this positive story. So then the narrative starts to change for the parents. And now, whereas when we started our school, we only had 90 spots, now we serve more than 700 students, and the waiting list is always, several hundred students. And initially, parents were nervous to select an autism school because they didn't want their child to have that label. But we haven't heard that in several years. And as a matter of fact, children are getting diagnosed earlier because of our outreach into the community, showing what our students can do with the appropriate supports and early intervention, that parents are not as scared, to go down that path of acknowledging and getting the proper support so their kids can thrive. So that's a big part of changing the narrative, is to help people know that there is a bright future, there is hope. Is there a change of lifestyle? Perhaps a little bit, but if as parents we change the narrative in our own head that everything they learn is a victory and really a miracle and a celebration of who each child is, there's a lot of happiness and joy that comes with being a parent of a child with autism and having the blessing of teaching children with autism.
Thank you so much, Diana. I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who need to hear this message, and that when they hear it, they will, I can almost hear people having a sigh of relief. I don't know what to point out from our discussion. We shared all these very interesting things. I wanted to highlight that, first of all, even if you live in countries, I'm speaking about the audience, even if we live in countries where we do not have the flexibility to establish new educational organizations for kids that are in the autistic spectrum or have any other type of learning difficulty, we can always advocate and speak loud about the need for more flexibility and less bureaucracy. And also, I wanted to highlight what you said about people who are neurodiverse and they can solve very special problems. As you said, people with fixed ideas can solve big problems because they are so devoted to what they do. Reaching the end of this discussion, I would like to thank you very much for being here and speaking to us about your school and the work that you do. It is such an inspiring story.
It's been such a pleasure to know that we can share our message internationally and really show what's possible when people are given the opportunity and the control to form a school that best fits a learner's needs.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everything. I will leave the website of the school at the description of this podcast for people to go and check and find out more about your work. Another episode of EdTransformed is ending. If you want to get in touch with us to share your stories or good practices, you can find us on LinkedIn. Link in the description of the podcast. Goodbye.